Disciple of Christ podcast. There's a couple of faces that may be familiar, though they are still strange faces. I do want to point to the bottom of the screen that you're seeing Mr. Jesse Watson and Stephen Nix. And if you'll bear with me for one moment, let's see here. What you will be seeing, if you go over to the Disciple of Christ channel, you're going to see that Mr. Stephen Nix and Jesse Watson have a long-form interview discussing, at least in part, the spiritual journey that's brought them to this point. But we have decided to dedicate this conversation that we're having to the subject of dreams. First, Mr. Jesse Watson, take 30 seconds. Tell us, where are you coming to us from today?
I'm coming from the future.
Yes. You're like, what, 12 hours ahead of us?
18 at this point. I just keep streaking ahead into the distance.
What is it like in the future? Do we make it?
It's glorious. The best is yet to come.
For those that are trying to figure out your Austrian accent, will you tell us whereabouts in the great island you are?
I am coming to you from the communist wastelands of Australia, the land of mandates and lockdowns. No, we're done with all that. I'm coming to you from the freedom-loving capital of Australia, which is the East Coast. Let's just say that. No one knows Australia.
They'll do it. They'll do a little bit of Google searching right now because I'm interested enough. And I have been told that you know how to field skin a wallaby in less than 5 minutes.
If you can't do that, you can't call yourself an Australian. You've got to hand your papers in.
Very nice. Mr. Stephen Nix, from where do you hail and where are you coming to us from? Not only geographically in the country, but what room are you in right now?
I'm in a little tiny office that's not set up for fancy lighting. I'm in Southwest Missouri on my little farm. I don't know what else to say. That's it.
This man knows how to milk cows and gather eggs. There's other things on the property, and you will see a little bit of that if you do want to check out the long-form interview. I am on the road for my Babylonian paycheck right now, and I'm coming to you from a very small Airbnb in the thriving metropolis of Cedar City, Utah. And I went to Wally World today, and I purchased a box, and I cut it so it would be holding this up. The main screen was right there, and then when I was putting scriptures and stuff, it was up on the screen there. But look at that laptop stand. I'm not sure if the lighting's good enough, but it'll have to be just good enough.
Better than mine.
Part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation regarding dreams with these gentlemen is because I've shared with them and they have shared with me different dreams that have happened, and it seems like there's a certain level of increasing frequency that's happening in more recent years. But let's explore some of these questions. And I'm going to, Mr. Stephen, since you were nice enough to give us some of these notes, I'm going to throw this to you first. Can weird dreams be from God?
And go and answer this now?
Yes.
The answer
you don't have
is...
to. You don't have to. He was warning us he was low energy, so I have to make up for the both of us. I need to make you well.
Look, Stephen, if the answer is not yes, then I might as well bow out now. I'll just turn my screen off. I'm done.
I would say the answer is a resounding yes. You know, I think there's a thought by people. You know, I think about like who's that in the movie Scrooge, or in the book, I'm sure, or not Scrooge, A Christmas Carol. You know, he sees Jacob Marley and he says, you know, you might be an undigested piece of beef or something like that. You know,
yes.
You know, people have weird dreams and they go, oh, it's because they ate that pepperoni pizza or whatever it may be. And if we didn't have weird dreams in the scriptures, we might be willing to just dismiss anything that came off as strange as being not from God. But think about Joseph of Egypt. You got skinny cows eating fat cows. That's pretty dang weird.
Then
the whole Revelation. See you later, Revelation.
Yeah.
And then you've got things that are supposed to be inanimate objects. These ears of corn eating other ears of corn. How does that work? But let me ask you this. Is some sort of strange imagery that you've had in a dream, but you do recognize the dream is from God? I'll start off. In one of the dreams that I had in 2020, there was a wiry spider creature that was buried inside of my stomach that I vomited up. And there was a whole bunch more to the dream, and that was a part of the lesson inside of it. But talk about like full-blown Matrix sort of weirdness. That was a part of it.
I had a dream where cars were doing mechanical jousting and they were doing wheelies. These cars were on their back wheels. and the spectators had those giant American #1 fingers on from the wrestling, and they were doing
very
this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Weird imagery, Mr. Nix.
In a dream that I know is from God. There were a bunch of people that were, maybe this isn't super weird, but there were a bunch of people worshiping a clown idol that was a military clown.
A military clown. It was not
Yeah,
Ronald
kind of funny.
McDonald.
No, and it was like falling apart and had all these wreaths around its neck and on the ground. And anyways, but
Yeah. Well,
you can see the symbolism of that.
even in my scripture study today, there's many things which just seem otherworldly. Where the vision that was given to Ezekiel, he saw the huge cloud of fire. The middle was filled with amber. There was 4 creatures who had legs that were straight. The bottom of their legs were straight and had hooves like a calf would have. They had bodies of men. They had 4 faces: face of a man, face of an ox, and face of a, what was the other one? A lion and an eagle. Their wings would touch. There's certain things that are otherworldly that I don't understand the meaning of it, but the Lord can use whatever he wants because he's the God of worlds without number. And I'm sure there's many things that we've never seen that are still a part of his creations.
Well, I think the Lord speaks to us in our own language. And if you're having weird dreams, it's probably just because you're a weird guy. That's simple. That's simple.
Let's go on to this one. Number 2, is it okay to share dreams with others?
Well, I hope so, because we've been sharing them.
We've been sharing them with each other. Let me at least say this. I think most people who are aware that they perhaps have received dreams from the Lord, or at least wonder about their dreams. I'm sure everybody, regardless whether they believe they've had dreams from the Lord or not, they have shared dreams with others. Mostly, I felt more inclined to share my dreams just with those that I feel like are on the path seeking to know the Lord also. And that's felt appropriate. But let me ask this. Is it appropriate to share dreams with others who are seeking to know the Lord for that purpose?
I always think, like, what do the scriptures say? You know, like essentially there's no point in a gift being given if it's not appreciated. So I kind of look at the things that the Lord gives me. I wouldn't share with someone if it wouldn't be appreciated, or it wouldn't be beneficial, or they would, you know what I mean? If it wouldn't cause things that were beneficial for them, then I probably wouldn't share it. But I do also think that people are more willing to accept a dream that you've had than opposed to straight revelation that you might get from the Lord, because that's more direct. But if you share a dream, hey, I had this dream, then people can kind of make their own interpretation of it a little bit as well.
Totally.
I think it's some of the, Stephen, go ahead.
So, you know, in LDS culture, over time, the pendulum has swung really far to the side that says, oh, everything's sacred. You keep it secret. Keep it to yourself, you know? And I remember when maybe 20 something years ago, when as an adult, I started having dreams again. And I remember sharing one of them with someone, and she gave me a really hard time. She was like, no, you shouldn't be sharing that with me. You know, like that's not okay. Like, why would you share a dream? You know, that, and also there was a feeling of, wait a minute, are you trying to say that you have some sort of authority over me because you're sharing a dream that it didn't have anything to do with this person, but there was this, you know, resistance, like, anyone that shares a dream must be a false prophet or someone who has an ulterior motive to deceive. And it was just the strangest thing that had that reaction.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying, where people think, are you somebody who's claiming spiritual gifts above me? Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think about Joseph. I'm sure it makes sense why he was resented by his brethren. For one thing, he's wearing the fancy dancy coat. And he says, yeah, all you guys, including mom and dad, all made obeisance to me in this dream, in this form and in this form.
Because of the coat
and the stars of the heaven. And I'm sure that it did annoy them. And I wish I could have them on a 3-hour podcast.
Well, are you saying you've got subpar guests? Is this your
no, I'm just saying that they've got some stories that I'd like to get as well. I've got a part of these stories. I'm grateful for it. So let me ask
hey, Stephen, I have a quick question. You said
Sure.
You mentioned then you dreamed about 20 years ago, and you said again. Was there a break in your dreaming, or?
Yeah, so I had some dreams as a child that were recurrent dreams that were disturbing. And I mean, they were such that I remembered them even as an adult. and I had them over and over and over. But in my mind now, as an adult, I go, "Whoa, those were revelation." And then I lived a life of mediocre discipleship for a long time. And when I decided that I was going to really study the word of the Lord, it was then when I was studying the Book of Mormon, frankly, for hours a day, that bring it all started up again as an adult. And then I'm sorry.
No, go. You're.
No,
did you ask? Okay. Did you have to ask to start dreaming again, or did it come as a natural byproduct of studying?
Well, you know, I was in a high of my religious discipleship, and it was going strong for a good while. And then I got lazy over time, and it kind of degraded and it went away. And then in the last, say, 2 years, when I have worked again on myself and getting to new spiritual plateaus of sorts, it started again.
It seems like when you put more efforts on the discipleship portion of things, it's kind of like a kickstart for some of these spiritual communications.
Definitely.
I'm thinking of the idea of like people probably watch this because they want to know, like I always, when I listen to people's stories, I want to know, how do I increase my relationship with Christ, and how do I hear his voice more, and how do I learn to be better at revelation and all those things? So that's why I'm asking that question. But like, I know for me, I was similar. I had dreams like that when I was young. And then as I got older and left the church, my life was just total debauchery. And so my dreams were basically just a mishmash of debaucherous times that I'd had. And I would continue to replay these things over and over. And so at some point I asked the Lord to I don't want to dream anymore. I can't go to sleep every night and just be hammered by Satan with all the bad things that I'd done. And so I stopped dreaming altogether. And it wasn't until, same as you, I'd been in the church again for a while and was really working on my discipleship. And I remember reading about the gifts of the Spirit. I'm like, oh, we're supposed to ask for these things. And so I had to ask the Lord, can I dream again, Lord? Like, I want to dream. I come from a family of people who have a lot of dreams. And I was reminded that sometimes they wouldn't always be good, but that there'd be, bad in there as well. And I sort of accepted that and said that I still wanted to move down that path. And then that's when I started to have some dreams. I still don't dream a lot. They're rare, a couple of times a year, but they're poignant usually.
You brought up a really interesting point, and I'm not sure if this is a tangent or not, Jacob. You can cut it off if it is.
We're all about tangents.
You said
a condition.
You said I come from a family that has lots of dreams.
Yeah.
So that's that's interesting. This idea that maybe there's some sort of a familial, like gift that's given to certain families. I've been told before about Islander people. Oh, the Islanders, they have lots of dreams. They have lots of that gift. So interesting that might be somehow the Lord might give it to certain families or cultures more than others. I don't know if that's scriptural, but
I'm definitely on the lean side in my family for that. I would be the least of the dreamers in my family, I would say.
Let me ask this. This is a question that's not written on the notes, but I think it's important. All of us, I believe, have had dreams that we recognize, well, that wasn't from the Lord, but we've also had dreams that we recognize are from the Lord. How does one distinguish a personal dream from something that's from the Lord?
I think it takes time. There's a couple. I can only talk about my experience, and I think it's important to say this at the start as well, is that whenever someone says to me, this is how the Lord works, this is what's this, and they start to put walls or boundaries around how things happen, how they work, I get cagey, because my experiences with the Lord are usually, they're not that a lot of times, that he deals with me in a unique way, and I'm sure he does for everybody. But I would say that usually my dreams are very mishmash. There's no defined start or end. They're very blurry. They're black and white. The sound's not there. They're incoherent. There's nothing to them. But if I have a dream that comes from the Lord, it's clear. It's really clear. And there's a lot of information conveyed in it. I can recall it exactly when I wake up. It'll still be there. I could go back to sleep knowing that if that was from the Lord and he wants me to write it down, it'll be there in the morning. Quite often I can't go back to sleep and I have to get up and write it down. And a lot of times, and I'll always be able to pray for an interpretation, and I'll get an interpretation of what it means. And it's more often than not, it's not something I was even on my radar. It's like, okay, here's this thing from out of left field, and this is what the Lord wants you to know right now. But and I've had a couple of dreams now, and we're going to share some, but the one of mine that I'll share is an actual event that I was told would happen, and everyone will be able to see that it happened. So over time, I've been able to see some of those dreams play out, and to have a history that I can say, okay, well, that's legitimate, that seems legitimate. So there's that for me.
Are you noticing some of those same patterns? Because when I hear Jesse describe this, Stephen, the whole, well, I know what my random thoughts and patterns and blurriness and incoherency is like when I wake up, and it's just shifting from this to that inside of a dream. But when it's from the Lord, are you recognizing that there's a more specific clarity in communication?
Definitely. And it's neat to hear Jesse's experience, because we didn't talk about this prior at all. In fact, see, it's good to get to know you. This is the first time we've actually talked. So
we'll see how you feel at the end of this.
I'm sure it'll be wonderful. But, from my personal experience is that, knowing it's from the Lord, oftentimes it's sticky in my brain. It's hard to describe, but like it's so vivid to me that even now, even though I had the dreams a long time ago, I can remember details. I can remember a lot of the details. And in fact, sometimes I go back and I read what I wrote, and I go, oh, I didn't put in this. Yes. That was a part of the dream. And I add little parts, Usually how it works for me is somewhere around like 3 or 4 a.m.
Yep.
Is usually when I have the dreams, 3 or 4, like right in that time frame. And
3 a.m. 3 a.m. is the time.
In the future for you.
Well, yeah. It's 3 a.m. tomorrow.
But I've gotten to the point where I recognize while I'm having it, even oftentimes, that this is it. This is something that I need to pay attention to. And I'm too afraid, Jesse, to not write it down. So usually
I've done the same thing.
I bring out my phone usually, and in the dark I'll like type out what the main things are, and then I the second I wake up, I'll be like, okay, what did I miss because I was half asleep, and I fill in all the gaps while it's still living in my mind.
You see these thumbs? They're not built for typing on little keyboards.
Thumbs on a smartphone.
But I was going to ask you, Stephen, when you were talking just then, like I've had dreams, and you'll hear me read one of them, and in it, you'll see I've written down, I've said, I remarked to myself, I knew that I was in a dream, but I realized that I was in a dream, but it was more real than real life. And I'm having this conversation and this realization with myself in the dream. Are you having those kind of experiences?
Definitely. And I've had, I haven't counted them, but like probably 40 something dreams.
Wow.
I've had a lot of dreams, and I've written down a ton of dreams. And in the dreams, oftentimes I ask the question, like, well, what does this mean? And it's told to me the interpretation of it in the dream.
Yeah, right.
And also, getting back to the earlier question about how do I know it's from God? One of the things that I've loved too is I've had things happen where it's happened in real life, what I saw in the dream, and like, how could I deny that came from God, because it actually happened? Yeah. Also, I had one dream in particular where a scripture was shown to me in the dream. A scripture that I didn't know, like by heart or something. And in the dream, I was saying, what is your interpretation of the Doctrine and Covenants, section 29, verse something or other? I can't remember what. It was like one of the last verses. But
and was it shown to you?
No. I was asking someone who was a church leader, and they couldn't give me an answer, and they kept on dancing around it. And I was like, they gave me an answer that was lots of speaking without giving me an answer. And I said, you haven't told me the answer. What is the interpretation of section 29 verse? Anyways, and then I woke up and I was like, well, now I need to know, what is section 29 verse whatever. And so I looked it up, and it was on the topic of the dream. And I was like, this one was from God. because I mean, how do you choose a random scripture that's going to be right on point, you know?
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I point out that I'm very much in agreement with what I've heard. Stephen, I feel like you, to where I have to write it down, because I know there's certain things that I've received by way of dream, and I felt like, okay, I'll remember it in the morning. And it was not that same level of clarity in the morning. And so, and then later in reading what I had written down, I realized there's much more detail than that. There's a certain level of pegged inside ingrained detail. There's one of them that I'll be sharing about these ships up in the sky. But in my dream, it was far more vivid and detailed than what I wrote down, because this one was one that I was writing down at 1:40 in the morning.
I should clarify too, 9 times out of 10, actually every time except for twice, I get up no matter what time it is, and I don't even use a phone. I go to my keyboard and I write it down. Good. So if you're someone who wants to have dreams from the Lord, my counsel would be, do that, prove it to the Lord. That was me literally. Do you remember when we started saying we were going to have a dream podcast, and then I said to you, hey, I had a dream last night, how interesting is that? And that was the one I was like, Heavenly Father, I've worked so hard this week, I've moved so many cubic meters of dirt, like it's ridiculous. Can I just go back to sleep for 1 hour and then I'll write it down, you know? Generally, I will get up. So I do want to clarify that. It's more of a one-off.
I think there's a lot we can. I don't think there's anything we can do to force dreams to happen.
No,
I believe there is a lot we can do to invite it.
I think, and what I would add to that too is, like, for me, the contrast is so stark, so black and white, because I don't have dreams unless they come with clarity from the Lord. Because I have so few dreams that have that sort of clarity, it's easy for me to discern the difference. But like, Stephen, you're saying you have so many dreams, like it must be harder sometimes to know what's what. Like for me, the evidence to me is like night and day. Like it's so easy to see the difference.
Since I was a child, most of my dreams are nightmares.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good feeling.
Good times. Can't sleep, clown will eat me. Can't sleep, clown will eat me. You know what I'm talking about, Jacob. Yeah?
No joke. No joke.
Like we all float down here. Goodness. Okay. Let me go to this question right here. How can we profit from others' dreams?
Go, Stephen. Go.
No, you first, Jesse.
You know, I would say, I'll give you a quick example. My dad rang me one time and he said, I had a dream last night. And he said, you were surfing near Byron Bay. And he said, and you got eaten by a great white shark. And he said, and I attacked, and I saw because I used to surf all the time. And like not that long ago, Australia had a spate of great white shark attacks. It was all over the world news. And we were just getting shark attack. And that's literally just not far from where I live. And so he was saying to me, I had this dream, and you know, and he said, I thought I should have like reminded you and just to be careful. And he thought, you're always careful and blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, I, for whatever reason, hadn't surfed at that particular location for a while. But the very next day, a guy got attacked by a shark on that beach and he died. And they had the ambulance on the beach. And, so I guess that's one way you could profit from someone else's dream is to not get eaten by a great white shark.
So I just want to mention too, Gideon, the story of Gideon in the book of Judges. We know the story of him being, I'll say called by an angel to release the Israelites from the Midianites, right? And that we know the story of like though there's too many people in your army, you're going to have to make it smaller. They drink like a dog, they lap like a dog. Or if they're afraid, send them home, all that stuff. So, and then, and he's a man that is, mighty for valor. And it says, I don't have it in front of me, but he's a good man, and then he has these miracles happen with like the fleece, and he has, the being wet. And so anyways, he has all these things happen. And then in that story, you read about some rando dude. It doesn't even mention the person's name. He just comes to him and says, hey, I had a dream about this bread that fell down and broke their tent. And they took it like, oh, awesome. And Gideon was like, this is a good sign. We're going to win. We're going to win, So, I love that story I don't think I've ever heard anybody actually talk about that for the value of somebody else's dream. But that's a great example, in my opinion. You got to read the actual story to get all the details. But
Yeah.
you
I
know,
think you have to ask though too. You know, like there've been times when I have benefited from other people's dreams, but I've had to read them with an open mind. I've had to also then go to the Lord and say, Lord, is there something in that dream that's pertinent to me and to my family? And to ask the question and to not have an expectation either way, you know?
Yeah. And I think that the big warning would be, is somebody trying to set themselves up as a light? Because
Yeah,
I think
always.
part of the reason that I've only shared dreams with people that I felt close to, and primarily with people that I recognize are on the path seeking to know the Lord, is because I have more confidence that they recognize I'm not trying to say, look at me, I get stuff. I know that oftentimes there's something similar that they can share with me, and we help one another in discussing what's been shared by the Lord by way of dreams. But that would be a big red flag when somebody's using their dreams as a way to say, look at me. I have to, let me go to this one right here, because I'll make a comment. I didn't see this before. Number 4, warnings that false prophets will share dreams that didn't come from God. I believe it was around 2018. I can't remember. It was when it was still Elder Nelson of the Quorum of the 12, Russell M. Nelson. And I've never had a single negative feeling about him in my entire life up to this point. But I remember in General Conference, he shared about a man that when he had 2 young daughters who were being operated on for their hearts, I believe it was a heart defect, both of them died on the operating table, and it's very sad. Decades later, as this man is now an old man, Elder Nelson talks about, and I had a dream, and these girls came to me and they said to me, Elder Nelson, we have nobody to be sealed to. And that dream that Elder Nelson had became the catalyst for him to reach out to this man in his old age, share the dream about the daughters being alone on the other side. And it was the catalyst for him getting this man active in the church again.
His son too, I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah.
When I heard that dream, I could not shake the strong impression that dream is false. I just couldn't shake it. And again, I've never had a single ill thought towards Elder Nelson at this part at all, but I recognize that dream is not what he's saying it was, even though it was the catalyst for that. Let me ask, what was on your mind, Stephen, when you wrote down number 4, warnings that false prophets will share dreams that didn't come from the Lord, that didn't come from God?
Well, I think the go-to would probably be Jeremiah 23, right? I mean, I don't have the. Should I bring out my scriptures? You know,
Well, I'm going to do this. I'll open up Jeremiah chapter 23.
Stephen, you're in luck because you're walking with a walking scripture set. Not that he knows them, but he's always has them at the ready. They're always at the ready.
Very handy.
He's in an Airbnb, but he's managed to rig up a situation where he can bring scriptures up on demand.
I think we're looking for verse 25, aren't we?
Yeah, 25, 26.
I'm going to do it in my radio voice.
And then it goes on. It kind of skips though.
So the whole chapter, the Lord's calling out the fake prophets that the covenant people are following. The Lord said in verse 25, I have heard what the prophets have said, that prophesy lies in my name, saying, I have dreamed. I have dreamed. How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets that prophesy lies? Yea, they are prophets of the deceit of their own heart. See, smooth things unto us. Why can't you just... Why you got to be so negative, Jeremiah? It's wrong to speak evil of these people, even if it's just... In other words, so connect this, Mr. Stephen, with the warnings that false prophets will share dreams that didn't come from God.
Well, it's definitely, you know, you think to, I think when people think about dreams in general and end times context, they think of Joel and his saying that old men will dream dreams, right? And so if we know people are dreaming dreams, but we also know that false prophets are dreaming dreams, and people that deny the gifts of the Spirit, right? If they deny the gifts of the Spirit, they, I think, are more prone to say, well, I think they think that it's going to generally be a false prophet.
Well, even when you were sharing about, you were about to share a dream with somebody. Oh, are you sure you should be sharing this? I think a lot of people have it in their mind to where, oh, that's relegated to people that are on the up above on the
Exactly.
spiritual ladder.
You're not,
All of
you've
us.
no authority. I mean, yeah, if it was my bishop, maybe then, or if it was a stake president who was telling me this then, but you're just some guy. You're nothing to me. You're not my husband. You're not, you know. So yeah, it's just it denies a gift of the Spirit. And you know, technically 1 Corinthians 12 that goes over some of the gifts of the Spirit. It
Well,
doesn't say dreams,
let me just bring this up because
right?
that was the next question. Is dreaming, as in dreaming from the
Oh
Lord,
yeah.
a gift of the Spirit? Is it a gift from the Spirit? I would say a resounding yes, or at least it comes in conjunction with the gifts of the Spirit.
But even just go back to 4 for a second. There's two things I think of. The first one is when it comes to false prophets, I worry that I could be the false prophet at times. You know what I mean? Like the onus is on me to make sure that my revelation that I get comes from God and that it's correct and that it's provable and it's, all these kinds of things.
Well, I've known people that had dreams and end up publishing prophecies about Donald Trump taking office once again after the 2020 elections. And it seems like it could be our own desires that create a vivid dream / prophecy like that, or it could be a deception from the adversary.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
There's something I'm not sure if this is exact. I'm sorry.
I think too that people.
I'm just going to shut my mouth. Jesse, you just keep going.
I did say I had 2 points, but that's okay. No, I think the other thing too is I think in the culture that we exist in now, we don't see prophets who come to us and say, I had a dream. This was the dream that the Lord gave me, like a 7 years of famine sort of thing going on, 7 years of plenty. Like we don't see that anymore. So dreams have kind of been relegated to, they're down there with the gift of tongues kind of thing. The gift of tongues now. Well, that's just when you learn a new language and you're a missionary. Like we do deny those. So I think people are less afraid of dreams than if you were to come out and say, like if I was to come out and say something maybe that the Lord had told me or one of the conversations that he and I had, that would be more offensive to someone than if I shared a dream because it's more of an affront. It's more, do you know what I mean? It's more of a line in the sand, whereas a dream is like, oh yeah, it's a dream. It's nothing. We don't value them.
And yet it's interesting. If you look in First Nephi, there's a real blur that's made between what is a revelation from God. It is a revelation to receive a dream.
I dreamed a dream, or in other words, I've seen a vision.
Yeah, exactly. He says they're synonyms.
And it does still happen sometimes in the church. I think of Joseph F. Smith, as recorded in Doctrine and Covenants, section 138. He was sick and nursing himself on his bed, and he was carried away in a vision where he saw part of what happens in the last days regarding the work on the other side. So that's the last one that I know of any president of the church sharing a vision that they had. But I think that's part of what causes the false concept of visions, to where it's available to anybody who exercises that level of faith to receive it.
But it seems also, though, as we become more digital and technological and these kind of things, and we move into modern times, the dreaming itself and those kind of more esoteric things, those subconscious sort of aspects of us are disappearing as we sort of become more into a digital age,
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot more denying the gifts of the Spirit. Let me go back over to these questions. Number 6. Can Satan give dreams? Can he be the source of inspired dreams, even if they're inspired?
He can give you tormenting dreams for sure. He tormented me with dreams and harrowed me up with a remembrance of all the things that I've done for years, which is why I asked to stop dreaming. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I go to bed and I'm exhausted the next day. I would wake up and I would be like, man, I'm so glad that was just a dream, because I was pretty sure I was calling the bishop up this morning to go and have a word with the bishop again. This kind of harassment, continual harassment.
Remember,
I think most would probably point to, if dreams, according to Lehi, are a synonym, or Nephi, are a synonym for visions, right? And we know that Jesus was caught away in a vision with Satan, where he showed him his kingdoms, and you know what I'm talking about from in the New Testament, where he tries to tempt Jesus with these different temptations, and you think, well, does that count? Maybe that counts as
Yeah.
Satan. Even Satan was able to create a vision even for Jesus to see. Is that what we're to understand?
Yeah. I think so. He can definitely conjure up images and give revelations. You just made me think. I wasn't intending to share this, but I remember it was summer of 2020. It's during election season. I was the MC for another one of the freedom rallies happening at the Salt Lake City Capitol. The night before, it was around 2 a.m, and I had a vivid dream, and it was a tormenting dream. In the dream, I was inside of a house or a building with no outside source of light, and I could feel dark spirits pelting my body as if they were running like a linebacker trying to enter inside of me. Bam! And I could feel it. And it was so painful, and like painful in a spiritual way. And it was so oppressive. And I'm calling out for help. And then I see my wife in my dream. And I say, I'm under attack right now. She says, what do you mean? Because she can't see anything. And I'm not seeing this either. I could just feel these entities pelting my body fiercely. And I says, there's dark entities trying to get inside of me. And her eyes went big because she didn't know what to do, but she knew that I was telling her the truth in my dream. And then one of them entered me and vocalized through me. It was so disconcerting. I woke up from that. Heart rate is up, bam, bam, bam. I could like feel it in my throat for a little bit. I'm like, this is horrible. It takes me probably like an hour before I can get relaxed enough and I could fall asleep again, because now it's probably 3 a.m. And now the same exact dream again, except there's no visual this time. It's like I'm trapped in the dark, like a blindfold over my eyes, the same pelting of these evil spirits trying to enter inside of me. And I'm fighting against it. It's so disconcerting. I'm calling out for help, and I wake up again 2 times in a row. And then I'm like, this sucks. It takes me an hour to get back asleep. And a third time, the same dream, where like linebacker-sized dark entities, I can feel them pelting against my body. And I have my wherewithal in my dream to say, Heavenly Father, what do you want me to do? And I'm ready to like raise my arm to the square if that's what needs to happen, even though it's inside of the dream. What do I do? And I could hear his voice say one word: learn. Okay. And I woke up. I woke up and I'm like, I am not going back to sleep. I have MC duties at noon that day. And now here's the interesting thing. I went and got a blessing from my friend Dustin. And I learned an amazing number of things during the course of that blessings as I felt like a physical release of whatever dark entities were trying to hold on to me. It was manifesting partially in the dreams as I felt them let go and depart. On my way there, I'm calling up one of the people who was in charge of organizers for this event happening at the Salt Lake City Capitol. And he mentioned, I didn't mention anything about any dreams or anything else. We're just discussing details and logistics about the event about to happen. He says, yeah, there's a lot of spiritual attacks going on right now. It happened to me last night, and it happened to Madeline as well. They were both
interesting
dreams of spiritual attacks. So what I recognized in that one, those dreams were a partial manifestation of actual dark spiritual attacks that were happening to multiple people at that time.
Wow. You know, I might mention too, concurrently with my dreams starting again, maybe within a couple years, I've also started having a major uptick in my nightmares again. And for the first time in my life, I've had what people would call night terrors, where I wake up in the middle of the night. What was that?
Night terrors in the sense that you don't wake up all the way. It's still reoccurring as you gain semi-consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, a feeling of dread, and I'm being attacked, and something's happening, and I spring out of my bed, and I'll run out of the room, or I'll think my wife is evil, or like my wife has to be, honey, wake up. Like, I've never had that in my life, and just in the last couple of years, that's been a normal thing for me. And maybe 2 weeks ago, I was having really bad nightmares. And I went back to, I woke up, it was so bad. I tried to go back to sleep. I went back into the nightmare. I woke up, I went back into the nightmare a third time. And finally I just said, I've said a prayer: Father in heaven, if you have anything to share with me, I would really love to have a revelatory dream instead of these horrible things I'm seeing. And then I fell back asleep and I had a dream, and I had a dream that was revelatory.
Yeah.
So my experience with that was similar too, and that's what I said before. Like I was warned when I asked if I could dream again that I'd be exposed to both when I slept, you know. And I asked the Lord about that recently. I'm like, why does Satan try to afflict me when I sleep? And that's the nature of Satan. You know, your subconscious is more available to him than you are when you're awake, and he can sort of have influence in that space. But I was also reminded of that scripture in the Book of the Mormon where it says, when you lie down at night, lie unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And to remember to do that, like to consecrate your sleep to the Lord as well, not just your waking hours, you know?
Yeah.
And
I noticed
sometimes we just have to deal with it too. It's part of the process.
It is part of the process, but I noticed there's certain times when it may just be going through the routine of the day, and I don't make a specific dedication of my heart and my mind to my Heavenly Father when I'm falling asleep, and I realize, okay, I've left myself more vulnerable.
Yeah. But you're never going to have that military discipline where you hit the mark every day and everything all the time. And that's part of the learning process. There'll be days when you forget those little things and you pay the price.
I'm going to number 7. How can we show God we appreciate this communication and invite more of it?
That's easy. It's the same as a spiritual journal. You get up after says the guy who said he didn't get up. But you get up and you write that down.
Yeah.
My Lord, I'm a slothful and an unwise servant.
And I notice that goes in conjunction with a lot of things. As I've tried to like hear the voice of the Lord in understanding scriptural process, the act of trying to write down whatever spiritual wavelength is commonly the catalyst for much more to come, including dreams.
I try to listen in a way that would be pleasing to my wife. You know how they tend to say, you never listen. If I can listen to the Lord in a way that would be acceptable to my wife, I know I'm on the right path. Give it that same value.
I'm going to go forward just a little bit. We've already talked about number 8. Let me ask number 9, because this is one that I struggle with a whole bunch. How to get the interpretation. If a dream is from God, there's an accurate interpretation from God available. And I feel like I struggle with that a whole bunch. Any thoughts on how to get an interpretation from God on a dream?
I go about it the same way I would my regular spiritual journal. You have to ask, for starters. That's a long question. Stephen, you go ahead. So I want to hear what you've got to say, because that's probably a whole nother podcast, to be honest.
So I know of people that have dreams that will say things like, I prayed about this for days and days and days and days and days. And maybe it is that way. And maybe it should be that way for a lot of people. I don't know. For me personally, some of them are just so self-evident, where it's like, it's not. Some of mine are very symbolic, and some of mine are just plain as day. This is what is happening, and there doesn't need to be an interpretation because it's so plain. You know, I usually, after I've had the dream and I've written it down, I will ask, while I'm in that submissive, dreamy state, what does this mean? You know, and then I will get back up and I will write down whatever comes to me. So I actually ask for the interpretation at that time. I do think that it's important to understand too that sometimes the interpretation scripturally, I think we can make a case that dream interpretation may not come for a long time. You know, you think about, I'd have to shake this out in scriptures, but you think about maybe I'm repeating videos I saw, but Joseph of Egypt, I wonder if he really truly understood what the corn, bowing to him meant until the day.
Family? For those, it was the stalks of wheat.
Wait, what did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I messed it up. Followed by the stars.
Stalks of wheat. I'm sick. You got to cut me some slack.
I forgive
My
you.
brain's not working. So the wheat bows to him, and you think it wasn't until much, 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 much later that he had his brothers bow to him as, the second-hand man to Pharaoh.
Oh, yeah.
And you think he probably didn't really completely understand the fulfillment of that dream until that moment is my guess,
I think there's probably times when the Lord designs it that way. And I think there's a lot of other times when the Lord says, I've given this to you. Got any questions? Because I'm willing to tell you.
And two, scripturally, we do know that sometimes the interpretation is given to another person, right? You know, there are people that I'm not sure if that's a gift or not, but sometimes other people are more familiar with symbols or whatever it may be that they go, oh, I think this is saying this or that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I've noticed for me, it'll be easier to get an interpretation when I'll sort it out in my mind as best as possible and present it to my Heavenly Father. And when I do get a little bit of confidence in interpreting a dream, it'll be presenting something to my Heavenly Father, and I can recognize a confirmation, or I can recognize the absence thereof. And I know that I don't quite have it right.
Yeah, right. Well, for me, I'm sitting here the whole time you guys are talking about it, and I just don't know a good way to say it. I don't want it to sound arrogant. It's not meant to at all. It's probably more to do with the way the Lord is trying to teach me at the moment, and trying to help me just stay on track with it. I tend to get my answers really quickly for what the interpretation is. It's quite often there's a lot of symbolism in it, and I can get the answer almost pretty much straight away, but I just have to ask the question, sit down and write it out. And it's usually quite detailed, and it's more than I was reading it. Like, it's more than I was expecting most of the time. There's times when I've asked a simple question and I'll get a one-page answer in response that covers a lot of things. I'm like, oh, okay.
I'll mention this, Jesse. Having read some of the things that you've written, I think a lot of it has to do with your childlike trust in the Lord. And I don't know anything.
I don't know anything.
In other words, I don't say that to puff you up, because I know one of the big risks is, I really am humble. I really am.
Yeah, of course. I really am stupid. I can tell you that.
But I think there's a certain amount of recognize it has nothing to do with me. There's no power in me. And I think that childlike submissiveness can invite a clearer, more defined interpretation.
I'm always conscious of the fact that if I've got to save my children from anything, it's probably me. And if I've got to save anyone from a false prophet, it's probably me. That's the false prophet. You know what I mean? Like, you have to start with yourself first and look at yourself as being the weakest link and the biggest stumbling block. I think that's always a good place to start.
Stephen, tell me your thoughts when you wrote down Joel and other scriptures promise dreams in the last days, and there's plenty of signs that are indicating it's rolling up on us if it's not fully there yet.
Well, Joel 2, is the one that I think most people would think of that speaks of, why don't you bring that one up, Jacob? But speaks of old men dreaming dreams, but also that, your young men will,
which one are we?
Have visions. Yeah, no.
Well, hey, listen, it's funny you should say that, because we were driving in the car this morning, my kids and I, and we talked. They said, "What are you going to talk to Jacob about today?" And I talked about that. And my kids were like, "Well, which one are you, Dad? Because you're 40." And I said, "Well, from where you stand, I'm an old man, but from where I stand, I'm a young man."
Yeah. And I had somebody who tried to tell me that Pearl Jam was classic rock, and I made them walk the rest.
My kids call it old school music. But I think the other thing that came up in that I wasn't aware of either is my son said to me, now he's only 8.5, and he said to me, he goes, we were talking about the nature of dreams, and he goes, "That happens to me all the time, Dad." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, Heavenly Father tells me what's going to happen, and then it happens." And I said, I said, just I'm all ears now, not my usual half listening, not my usual half listening father, my terrible parenting. I'm like, I'm totally listening.
How to invite that more, because I've known a whole bunch of people who have some form of what Stephen also described, to where spiritual gifts in younger years. And it was years later when a rededication happened, when those spiritual gifts would return. How do you invite somebody young and in tune at such a young age to continue on that path?
Well, I was curious, and I said to him, "So what does that look like for you?" And he said, sometimes it could be, I'll have a dream about something I'm going to say, or something someone will say to me. And he said, and then it just seems to happen. And I said, "Well, what do you think the purpose of that is?" And he said, "Well, I think Heavenly Father's trying to get me to realize that he talks to me, and I can listen to him."
I think it's wonderful.
So, yeah, it was a total surprise. And it came about just because of me mentioning we were going to do this, Just one second. I'm going to turn my phone on silent because it's bipping.
No, tell everybody I say hi. Mr. Stephen.
Are we going to stop the video, or are you?
We're not doing it.
Okay.
We're going to tell dirty jokes about Australians.
So, the thing about Joel you read it, and he makes it sound almost like, see, he says afterwards, and it makes it sound like some of the fulfillment of that might be almost like in like Zion, the building of Zion, and when in Christ's return times, But then it's funny because you read in Acts 2 where Peter repeats Joel, and he says,
Remind
you're
them.
seeing the fulfillment of what Joel said.
Yeah.
Interesting. And that was a long time ago. And I think that there can be multiple fulfillments of that, of course.
I think it's
And I think it's happening now again. One of the things I did want to mention is, this kind of goes into multiple topics of ours. I was blown away when I saw a video on YouTube where a lady had gone through, and people have been sharing their dreams, their last days dreams and visions and such. And people from all walks of life. I mean, you had a black guy, you had a country boy white guy, you had from all over the world sharing their dreams, and they were the same. A lot of the same things were happening, and the lady went through and like listened to all these people who have all had dreams about giant tsunamis, taking over giant tsunamis, destroying big cities. Now listen to all of them share their dreams about people being rounded up into camps if you're a Christian. Now
earthquakes,
and I was listening to these dreams, and I was like, I've had that same dream. I've had that same dream. And one of the things, and helped with interpretation, it was interesting to hear their perspectives, that I was like, wow, maybe that's what helped me, filled in some of the gaps of what I saw. Or so interpretation can also help when somebody else has had dreams that are similar.
And here's what's popping into my mind. I would feel for those who have invited these sort of communications and have paid the price to ask the Lord interpretation, and are at least making that struggle, I would think it would stick out if somebody's trying to insert their own sort of ideas and pass them off as dreams from the Lord. Those sort of things stick out quickly. I know certain people who are phenomenal at catching forgeries when it comes to forged guitars meant to look like a classic Gibson or something else, because they know how to look for the markers and it sticks out quickly. I would encourage people to practice discernment, because I feel inclined to invite as many people as they feel inclined from the Spirit for themselves to share dreams. Because
that's the question, isn't it? Like you said, can dreams be prophecy? But they can't be prophecy if no one hears them. It's a tree falling in the woods. You know what I mean? Like, unless it's shared. So, but I mean, I don't share a lot of my dreams. But
is dreaming a form of prophecy? Does that make one a prophet if they have a dream and it comes to pass? You know what? This word right here, I know when we talk about a prophet, LDS culture has changed what that means. In other words, in LDS proper, it means, is this person supposed to be in charge of all the congregations? That's not what a prophet is.
Numbers 12.
Yeah. Share what you're thinking from Numbers 12, because that's not uploading into my mind.
Well, just if there be a prophet among you, I will make myself known unto him in a vision and in a dream.
But the funny thing about that is, but the funny thing with that is there's so many lay members of the congregation that would fit that terminology. Yeah. But then the people that we call prophets don't fit that terminology by their own acknowledgement. That's, you know what I mean? Like that's the whole thing, has had a pole shift.
Oh, I think everybody who would claim to be a disciple of Christ has to some degree, be able to hear and follow the voice of the Lord, be able to hear and follow the voice of the Good Shepherd. And that's going to come in the form of impressions throughout the day, perhaps even hearing the voice of the Lord directly, or dreams in the night and the Lord gives interpretations. In other words, I think he's inviting all of us to have that level of communication with him that we commonly attribute to a prophet, as if they're above us, rather than we're being invited to obtain it for ourselves, to exercise the faith to obtain it.
I like what you were saying before, Stephen, too, like that idea of, because I hadn't really paid that much attention to dreams. And then when I did, I started to see those common threads, like there's so many, you can literally put dreams into categories of, tall buildings, volcanoes, earthquakes, tidal waves, and these are common threads. And some of them are symbolic, but quite a lot of them, and war especially like for me, one of the most common themes that the Lord seems to have, I have dreams about, is war and what's going to happen in my country, because my country is not your country. And there's not much written about my country.
Jesse, you ready to start giving some of this? I'm about to pull.
Yeah, just on that. It's time for 3 clicks, Jacob, because I changed the dream. I just had a prompting to change the dream that I was going to share the second one.
Okay, here we go. 3 clicks, a little bit of editing. Now, I asked Stephen and Jesse both to pick a couple of dreams that would be worthwhile to share in a podcast like this. I did the same thing as well. Jesse, you're going to kick this off for us. Take us away.
Okay. So I had 2 dreams, and the reason I included these dreams, one was very literal, which is this first one. And the second one was more symbolic. So I wanted to include one of each so I could sort of show someone maybe who's trying to seek the Lord a little more what it looks like for me and the difference between those 2 kinds of things. If hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. So anyway, this was Wednesday, the 5th of September, 2018. And I got up in the middle of the night and wrote this down, and I wrote a dream of war and unrest in Europe. And I said, it has been some time since I had a dream that I felt was prophetic. There's that dreaded P word in nature, in that I felt it showed future events. That was my interpretation at the time. Last night, however, I had just such a dream. I dreamt 2 separate parts to a dream that seemed to show 2 aspects to a conflict of some sort. At first, I was standing in a tiny Eastern European village in a little dirt street that had about 6 or 7 houses, and they were like in a little L shape. And actually, the L went this way. And on the corner, it was kind of on the corner of 2 roads, 2 dirt roads, 6 or 7 houses, nothing around them. High peaked roofs that they likely had some usable attic space in them. And at first it looked English to me, but I was able to talk to myself and reason in my dream like we talked about, and also to get answers from some unseen source also. And I was told that they weren't English. In my dream, I settled on the fact that they were Eastern Bloc peoples, say around Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, those kind of areas. I was standing in the street when a jet flew past really close to the ground, closer than I think is actually possible, but this was so that I could see what was happening next. I saw bombs of different types appear directly above these 6 or 7 homes, and they were destroyed as the people in the street who were caught by surprise ran and tried to take cover. I stood there in the middle of this, watching it all happen as a bystander. I felt safe though. So I was right at the intersection watching this plane come over. Typical, MiG-23 sort of plane. The next scene I saw, I was actually part of what was happening. I was on a similar street and I was in a piece of artillery. It was an open air cockpit, extremely old and dirty. It looked like it had been dug up out of an old muddy field. It was that bad. But the commander of whatever force it was gave the orders to start it up, and I did. And it worked, and it moved on its old tank tracks as it should. He gave the orders to have it cleaned and made functional. I had the thought that they were going to use it for something big, something bad. I looked around at the people and tried to figure out where I was. I thought maybe Afghanistan or Syria, but again, the people's faces were so white. And again, I saw the same European-style villages with Christian churches and influence, etc. It was definitely Eastern Europe. The people looked poor and dirty. In the next scene, I saw a huge group of young people. There must have been 200 or 300 of them, all making their way in haste down a large green hill. There were no adults with them, and the oldest seemed to be teenagers. I saw a young girl walk back up the hill to retrieve an old rusty bicycle that she seemed to think would aid her escape. They were all in a controlled hurry and heading in exactly the same direction, like they were escaping across a border or out of town at least, and that was all I was able to remember. I do remember looking at the jet as well and the particular type of jet it was, and I also remembered seeing the color of the uniforms, and they were like a darker green, and was able to see them later on when this played out. So fast forward to the 27th of February, Ukraine war is happening, obviously. Lord, there's so much chaos in the world right now. I'm watching the people of Ukraine and their plight in the face of the invasion. I heard you remind me of the dream I had of war and unrest in Europe from the 5th of September. And I actually got the date, came to me and everything. As soon as I saw the houses on the news with the high roofs and the dirt streets, the uniforms too, even the plane I saw flying so close to houses, then blowing them up. I saw that video. I saw a video on YouTube of a plane flying over the exact houses. And as soon as I saw it, my kids and I were on the lounge watching, and I'd like jump off the lounge. I'm like, that's what I saw, like freaked me out. That video was exactly as you showed it to me. My mind instantly went back to that dream and I remembered it. At the time, I thought this was like 20 years away, not happening right now. What can you teach me right now, Lord? What do I need to know about what is happening? And this is what the reply was. It said, watch, listen, and be ready to hear my voice. You have the opportunity for now to watch from a distance as things unravel. In time, the unraveling will be on your doorstep. For now, it is not. Watch and pray for those in need at this time. See it for the shadow or type that is yet to come. As I've said before, this is not the end, but merely the beginning. And then I said in my conversation with the Lord, Lord, I'm so glad to have had that dream. It helps me to see your revelations in this journal proven true, that I'm hearing you correctly, that I'm not deceived, and bolsters my faith significantly. And his reply was, this is just the beginning. You will yet see my words fulfilled. I am a God of truth and I cannot lie. And that was the end of that one.
Wonderful.
So I included that because it's very literal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to skip. You know what? Let's go to the next one. I was going to skip forward to Jesse, but I remember you wanted to show difference between something that was more literal and something that was more symbolic.
Yeah, sure.
There we go.
Yeah. So this was 23rd of September, 2021. Said, I had an interesting dream last night. I was in a tall skyscraper on the Gold Coast. This has people's names in it, but I don't think people will know who this is. I was right on the Broadwater next to the Gold Coast Seaway. The apartment we were in was near the top of the building. It was a large apartment, but very old and needed refurbishing. It had a lot of rooms and bathrooms. I remember in this apartment were my parents, my wife and children, and our friends, my friend Chelsea and her children, and the apartment belonged to some other people that I know. I remember they were discussing the craziness in the world at that point. I remember they were talking about vaccines and mandates and things of that nature. The discussion was centered on following the prophet when personal revelation received from the Lord is different. I was telling my friend Chelsea that our bishop had praised Kylie, my wife, for making decisions based on personal revelation, not just for following the crowd. And just then my mum said, did you see the latest announcement from the church? Before she answered, I looked over out of the giant windows in the lounge room. This was on my left. And the windows faced away from the ocean, which was at my back, to the west and southwest, and looked over the Broadwater and back to the mainlands towards Labrador. And I saw the largest rock go sailing past the building just above our heads. It was maybe 50 meters away from us, slightly above us, and as big as a van. Like, it was big. It was dark gray, not quite black, and it had many different angles, but I could see parts were smooth and some parts were rough. It was really clear. And it was sort of oval shaped. I remember being so surprised in my dream, and in typical me fashion of understatement, I said, look, meteorite, as it goes flying past. I watched it go right by us and land in the Broadwater. Like, so, you know, like think Florida, you know, like with the Keys and the water that comes out to the ocean, like that kind of thing. There was a huge tremor, but I didn't feel it. But you could see when it hit the ground, you could see the tremor and the waves rippling out. I remember thinking that it would kill all the sea life. I looked down in the Broadwater and I saw a huge hammerhead shark flopping around at the surface, clearly dying. I also saw a huge great white shark nearby doing the same thing. No one seemed too concerned still at this point, but I was. The next thing I noticed that all of the water in the seaway was funneling out to the ocean at rapid speed. It was emptying the whole Broadwater out, and there were high peaks in the water, like a rip as the water poured out against itself, like stationary waves. I was standing at the window on the north side of the building looking out at this, talking to my father, and I said to him, Dad, look at all that water funneling out. Like, you know what that means, right? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me out there and he looked at me and he said, you're right, Jesse, we better get out of here. I remember telling everyone a tidal wave was coming and we needed to move. I remember giving very clear instructions to the families with us to take off their church clothes, put on some normal clothes and grab a backpack with a change of clothes and some small things, and let's get out of here. I think in my dream, my intention was to drive west into the mountains, knowing that I could follow the mountain range back to my home that way, get home. After that, I remember trying to get everyone organized and struggling to get out of the building because we were so unprepared, and also because it was hard to get out of the apartment. It had so many rooms and weird bathrooms and low roofs, and I kept hitting dead ends and getting stuck, and it was so frustrating and weird at the same time. I just could not get out of this building. And so then I asked the Lord, what am I to learn from this dream? What is the interpretation of this dream? And at the risk of offending some people, this is what he said. He said, the building represents the church. Your exodus from that building was the exodus from culture and tradition, and eventually the church itself. When you tried to leave, you saw that false traditions that had crept in and polluted the people made it impossible to escape or hard to escape. The meteorite represents the self-imposed destruction the church brings upon itself for its works and the condemnation it's under. In the same way that a comet cannot be stopped once it enters into the atmosphere, so too is the destruction of that institution set in stone. It will be in part by its own hand as it changes each day more and more to accommodate the world and the great and abominable church of which it is a part. Its announcements are the very meteorites that destroy it. There will yet be more announcements made as it aligns with Satan's kingdom. There will be more mandates, more lockdowns, more urging to be good global citizens by its leaders. The people can feel that this is evil, and yet they still continue to march blindly towards destruction. Just as the Jews did, so too did the Pharisees of your time. Destruction cometh speedily thereafter. And I said, why was I making a plan to head to the mountains, Lord? Was that literal or a type? And he said it was a representation of the journey out of obscurity. The people must leave everything behind to come unto me. This was also represented in the removing of the church clothing, the fine linen, and putting off the natural man in exchange for a more humble garment of everyday clothing. Most will not be prepared to leave the world behind. They have built up great comfort for themselves within the walls of the church. They are fat, deaf, and blind as they live their lives inside the great and spacious building. Leaving requires great sacrifice and courage. Leaving requires voluntarily entering into the wilderness of spirit and body where I can find them as they try to find me. And I said, is there a time frame attached to these things, Lord? Is there one big specific thing or meteorite that brings destruction? And he said, there are many. They will be both big and small. The small ones are easy to explain away by the members and by the world at large also. They are easy to discard even. It is the big ones that shake foundations, that tear apart houses built on sandy foundations that are unmistakable. They are needful and necessary. They give those who may yet be humbled a chance to find the truth and the way. And then my question was, what was the tidal wave after the meteorite, Lord? And he said, the separation of wheat and tares for the last time. The great division that comes among the people as spoken of in Scripture, and the destruction and chaos that comes with it. It will be terrible indeed for the wicked, but the righteous need not fear the day. It clears the way even more so for the great and marvelous work.
Thank you for that, Jesse. I
I
don't even feel like, unless there's any questions, I feel comfortable just leaving it there at that, because I don't want us to
I got sweaty palms from reading that.
Yeah. And what I could hear from the little bit of commentary that you were given, this was the level of detail and clarity where it's clear the Lord wants you to see things and recognize this is from him.
Just the simple things like the meteorite, like how close it was, the way it moves, like just in perfect gravity, the angles of it and the colors. And, you know, like I like to gemstone fossick and stuff, so I'm familiar with that. But just the way it moved, the way it looked, just such clarity, you know, so much clarity.
Mr. Stephen, I invite you.
So I just want to say something first. You know, there's the clarity. I can't harp on this enough. I think about this idea of just the clarity. These dreams that I've had, I can close my eyes and I can see. They're so sticky in my memory that I can remember the clothing the lady was wearing. I can remember the look the man gave me, or, you know, like that kind of thing. They're very memorable. The first dream that I put on here is just a dream that skips from place to place. I've had a lot of these dreams where it's like, I'm here, I'm in another place, I'm in another place. And the second one is a much shorter dream, and it's much more symbolic. And some of these dreams too, I want to point out that they don't necessarily happen, I don't think, in even real time. I think sometimes these dreams come like that, like the download thing, you know, where it's just boom, and a bunch of information happens really fast. But all right, January 5th of 2007. I went to bed as usual and had a dream that was quite vivid to me, and I felt like I should write it down, so I got up and wrote as many details as I could remember. This is all one dream in parts. Here it is in as close an order of events as I can remember. I dreamt that I was watching the news, and a slender older man, perhaps in his mid-60s, with gray hair and a really hairy neck, who identified himself as a former sheriff and was some sort of spokesman for an organization, was speaking of the various public service jobs, namely of the fire and police departments and their foul language, bad performance, and corruption. This man was contending that the reason that we had these problems is because we don't pay them enough, and that if we raised their salaries, we would get higher quality employees. I remember standing with a member of the press in a secluded place by a concrete building that was poorly lit. He seemed quite agitated to be meeting with me. I asked, "Why don't you report on all this corruption?" He responded, "Hey, we report on all we can without getting ourselves into trouble." I sensed that what this meant is that if they reported the whole truth, the Gadiantons in the police would come for them. Interesting. I dreamt that there was way too much schoolwork for small children. I saw a small child at a desk with a pile of paperwork and a brow furrowed with stress. I dreamt I was in a large store like a Costco. There were lines as far as I could see. I was standing in line. I had the impression that there had been an earthquake that had been a fairly bad one, just enough to get people a little concerned to get them shopping for some supplies. I got the impression that the earthquake wasn't enough to disrupt people's routines because I looked up at a TV while I stood in line that had a feed to television shows, and there was some popular reality dance show or something on. Then a woman who was at the cash register yelled out to the crowd that the machine is down and that anyone who was using credit, it seemed to me that she mentioned a name of the credit, but it was unfamiliar to me, and I don't remember what she called it. But these people would not be able to buy anything today. People in line got worried and upset and stood for a moment in disbelief. I remember people pulling out their wallets to see if they had cash and purchasing the most important things in their carts that they had cash for. Then there was another earthquake that was more severe than the first. Everything shook violently, and people in the warehouse tried to find a place where nothing would fall on them. Debris and beams fell on the people below. I dreamt next of a couple of LDS missionaries going into an AM/PM mini-mart and being violently refused service and kicked out forcibly. I got the impression that this rude behavior was widespread. I commented in my dream, "I didn't think people today would act like that because they're too afraid of getting sued." I seemed to understand after the question that it was just accepted by the populace as acceptable. I didn't really see why people were so mad, just that something had happened to change public opinion of the church. I dreamt that I was kind of floating overhead and I saw a multitude of people moving in a crowd in what looked like an old factory scene. I saw a friend of mine in the crowd walking along, and the interpretation came to me that these are all people who had to find other jobs because I did the wrong word there, wrong there. Theirs are no longer available, or perhaps obsolete. My friend works in the tech field. I dreamt that there was a shortage of food and that people who had pets were starting to question if they should keep feeding their animals. I saw a woman looking at some feed she was going to feed her animal and having a moment where she stared at the feed, wondering if she should be saving it for herself and yet feeling awful because she loved her animal, meaning that she was going to save it for herself to eat.
She was going to eat the animal food.
She was going to eat she was like, "I don't know if I should be feeding this. I love my animal, but I should save it
for my horses or just for me?"
Yeah. I then stood in my friend's kitchen, the one who was walking in the crowd, who, by the way, is into preparedness and has stored food. And he had 2 loaves of bread. One loaf looked good on the outside, but inside was green and poison. He told me that it was a bad loaf and he wouldn't recommend it. He then pointed to the other loaf and offered me some. I took a bite and it was out of this world delicious. He told me that it was a special bread that only his wife makes.
You know what's interesting about that is I had a dream not long ago, and in this dream, people were starving, and somebody had bread cultures, like little starters in a jar, but they were red and they were discolored, and they were trying to make bread, but the bread was poisonous that they were making. It wasn't the right bread. It wasn't the delicious bread, that the bread of life, you know?
Wow,
So
interesting.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, totally cool. And I saw things in your dream that I'm like, oh, I've seen that too. I've seen, not all of it, but yeah, parts of it.
Stephen, did I cut this off at the right place? Was that the end of the dream?
That was the end of it. So that one just kind of danced from place to place, and I think most of it is
like different vignettes.
Yeah, and some of that stuff, I mean, it isn't, I think, revelatory in like a sense where you're like, whoa, that's, I don't know, like, I mean, the child with his brow furrowed with stress, I think that that's been an increasing issue in the United States and probably around the world. You know, that there's lots of kids that are overwhelmed with schoolwork. You know, but that's, to me, that puts it more in a time frame, you know, for some of these events to take place. But
yeah, because I know some dreams that I've had, I'll recognize that I'm just I'm an invisible observer inside a certain location at a certain time, but I realize I don't interact. Similar for those who have seen the show Quantum Leap. There's a character who helps interact, and
Jesse, classic American show, Jesse.
But in other words, I've had times where I recognize I'm simply an invisible observer who doesn't interact. I'm just walking around in the midst of what I'm seeing.
Well, that's some of the things I just picked out of that then was like in my dream, you heard me say I was an observer in the first part, I was active in the second part, and I was an observer in the third part. And I had vignettes, the same as Stephen was saying just then, a lot of clarity and a lot of detail. Themes are very similar as well. Like there's a commonality to like a language that the Lord speaks, even though it's translated into our own version of that language, but there's definitely a commonality.
Stephen, I invite you to do the second part.
Okay, number 2. I did a more recent one, September 2021. Dream I had this morning. An old, arrogant, and rather tame lion was walking through a jungle. His frame was bony, and he lacked the strength he had when he was young. He came to a group of animals resting together, a lion, a leopard, a rhino, and more of the dangerous animals of the world. The lion felt, and it's like I knew how he felt. The lion felt, I am the king, and they all know it. So he had no fear as he approached. He stopped to basically check in with his subjects. Before he could say anything, the animals all arose and formed together in a blur of commotion into one force that rushed the lion. It was as if they were no longer many animals, but one giant creature that would destroy the lion. The lion stood fearless, as if their advance could not hurt him, believing past glories and victories meant he could not lose. The giant creature turned into an enormous, squarish, tan tank. So it's like it was this giant animal, and then it became
like a metal piece of weaponry.
Exactly. And the figure of the lion became an elderly military veteran, a United States veteran, sitting in a wheelchair with his head bowed in weakness and defeat. The tank flew through the air with so much speed and came down, crushing the veteran, and I awoke. So that's one that I did pray about, and you know, I didn't write down my interpretation like Jesse did, but the lion represents the United States and the glories that we have, we rest upon. We think we are strong. We are not strong. We are weak because of our lack of morality. We are weak because we don't follow God. And these other animals represent the many alliances that will take place that Isaiah speaks about, even that we can expect that there will be alliances that will invade our country and destroy us. Like Isaiah talks about.
The interesting thing with that one is, like, I get imagery of Daniel with the leopard's feet and all of that, but I don't know if Jacob remembers, but I sent him a dream just recently, and in this dream I was in America, and I was walking around near the beach in America, Southern California somewhere, and I was picking up all these crystals out of the ground. They're just amazing crystals, like on the matrix and shapes and sizes, and these crystals represented truth and you know, freedom and all these things, and they were being trampled underground by the Americans. And in this dream, that's what the Lord, the same thing is exactly what you just said, that they'd lost morality and they'd lost truth. And in the next part of the dream, I was with the President Biden, I guess he was. I mean, I don't really care about the politics of America that much, but and he was refusing to let go of power. And it was very much this theme of this elderly dying gentleman and the loss of morality and the great truth, and then the invasion that was coming because of that. Same thing.
What sticks out to me in your dream, Mr. Nix, is that there was no respect for this elderly lion. For me, I love to watch combat sports, boxing, and mixed martial arts. And there's plenty of times when an up-and-coming fighter will be fighting a fighter obviously towards his end of his career, probably a former champion with a highlight reel stuff of nightmares. And almost always you'll see this younger fighter have a level of discipline and respect as he engages the more experienced fighter who doesn't have the same kind of prowess in his youth. What I got from your dream is that lion figured, they all know I'm in charge. They know the kind of beatings down. They realize my claws, my leap, my roar. And when it came down to it, it's like, oh, we got no respect for you. Bam, all of us together. You got nothing, homie.
Undefeated in 2 world wars, and now look at you.
Yeah. You know, another thing that we didn't really touch on earlier, but as far as knowing if a dream is from the Lord too, I would also point to, is it in line with the revealed word? You know,
that's an important one. Give some thoughts on that.
Well, like I mentioned, Isaiah, you know, over and over and over, it's about invasion, right?
King of Assyria,
King of Babylon, you know, just that to come into the land and punish us for our as the arm, one of the hands of the Lord, you know.
That's the theme that I get with. I didn't share any dreams really about that today, but it's not something that's usually on my radar, but consistent theme from me for the Lord is invasion of my country and your country. And like the phrasing that he's used before is like, people will say, who is able to withstand the king of Assyria? Yeah. He's terrible. What that's going to look like in your country, in my country, you know? It definitely seems to be a theme for a lot of people.
I think that's important, is the Lord has revealed quite a lot. I did not have a love or even really an understanding or respect for the Old Testament when I was a young missionary in ages 19, 20, and 21. It hasn't been until these past couple of years that the Old Testament just sticks out so much. And as I read almost on a daily basis, as I read another chapter from the Old Testament, I realize the Lord's calling to us today the same way that the prophets of the Book of Mormon are calling out to people. The prophets of the Old Testament are calling out saying, hey, I may be sharing with you experiences that happened back in my day, but I'm calling to you guys because it's your situation now. It's
very much that Isaiah thing of then and now. You don't read anything almost in the Old Testament that's not then and now.
Yeah. This is the only dream that I've had of this nature, and I'll simply share a little bit about this dream. This was only about 1 month before my oldest son was born. Now, and I'll just give a little preface. A spiritual awakening that I had for the past 5 or 6 years opened my eyes regarding the covenants in the Book of Mormon to Lehi's descendants. I had numerous times where I could feel the Spirit repeatedly slapping me across the face saying, Jacob, are you paying attention to this? Jacob, are you paying attention to the covenants to Lehi's descendants? And so this dream is the only one that I've had of this nature. It was similar to the Matrix loading program. If you know that movie, you know the program where everything's blank and all white.
That was when you learned Kung Fu, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't learn Kung Fu, but the items that happened in this dream were the only things there. There was no, in just about every other dream that I can remember from the Lord, there's background imagery, whether it's outside, whether it's inside of a building. I could start paying attention to other details. This one had no other details to pay attention to other than the things mentioned in the dream. First week of June 2013, I dreamed that I came across 3 men who were next to a beautiful horse. 2 of the men were Caucasian-looking men in their 50s. They were probably 50s, maybe early 60s, both standing close to each other. The other man was a Native American-looking man in his 50s. All 3 seemed to have some sort of responsibility, perhaps ownership over the horse. The 2 Caucasian men seemed healthy, happy, and were wearing cowboy-looking clothing from generations past. The Native American-looking man was skinnier, had a strong yet melancholy expression, and was dressed in traditional Native American-looking attire. It was buckskins with the tassels and everything. Though all 3 of these men seemed to be dressed in attire from times past, I had the impression that it was present day. The Native American was close to the horse, but standing a few feet away from the other 2 men. He had a tall staff and seemed to lean upon it. Again, just the level of detail in all 3 of their faces, their clothing, their age, the lines around their eyes, their facial expressions. All of this was just intensely present. As I approached these 3 men, the 2 cowboys greeted me. And the Native American simply looked at me without changing his expression. These cowboys were happy to see me. They're like, oh, hey, friendly, get to know you, hearty handshake sort of thing. I felt a strong desire to share with all three of these men 3 Nephi chapter 16, verses 10 through 13, which read, thus commandeth the Father that I should say unto you, at that day when the Gentiles shall sin against my gospel, and shall reject the fullness of my gospel, and shall be lifted up in the pride of their hearts above all other nations, and above all the people of the whole earth, and shall be filled with all manner of lyings, and of deceits, and of mischiefs, and all manner of hypocrisy, and murders, and priestcrafts, and whoredoms, and of secret abominations. And if they shall do all those things, and shall reject the fullness of my gospel, behold, saith the Father, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them. And then will I remember the covenant which I have made unto my people, O house of Israel, and I will bring my gospel unto them. And I will show unto thee, O house of Israel, that the Gentiles shall not have power over you, but I will remember my covenant unto you, O house of Israel. Ye shall come unto the knowledge of the fullness of my gospel. But if the Gentiles will repent and return unto me, saith the Father, behold, they shall be numbered among my people, O house of Israel. As I recited these verses from memory, the expression on the cowboys changed. They seemed to be very bothered by the verses being shared and began to walk away from me. I projected my voice so that they will still clearly hear me as I finished reciting the verses. The reaction of the Native American was just the opposite. His sullen expression changed, and he seemed to be invigorated. He seemed to have strength building up inside of him, yet he did not make a sound so as to hear the rest of what I was sharing. His posture straightened, and a noticeable passion was now on his face as he smiled, exposing a missing tooth. I finished the verses. The Native American raised his fist high in the air and let out a loud whoop, seeming to show his agreement with the verses shared. The whoop was loud enough to turn the cowboys around to look at the Native American for a moment, who now seemed confident and strong. The cowboys then turned back around and continued away. The dream ended shortly thereafter. Now, this is one to where I only understood in part at the time. It wasn't until these past 2 years that I recognized, okay, here's what the Lord needed me to understand before I could understand the interpretation. The Gentiles of the Book of Mormon are the Latter-day Saints of today. And when the Lord is
you cannot understate that, Jacob.
Yeah.
That is the most important knowledge that we need to have to understand the scriptures at the moment. Yeah.
Like there's a conversation that I had with a bishop of the church. He reached out to me and we exchanged messages for a couple of hours before we talked on the phone for about 3 hours, and I did not let up on him. Bam, bam. When he's writing to me about, oh, you think this, you think that, I'd say, tell me who the target audience is for Isaiah chapter 1. If you can't tell me that, stop pretending you believe Jesus Christ and his words in the Book of Mormon. Bam, bam, bam. And he finally realized that he didn't care about the words of Jesus Christ in the Book of Mormon. And he had a small moment of humility, which lasted for about 6 days until General Conference happened. And then, oh, yeah, follow the prophet, follow the prophet. But in other words, Jesus Christ, 3 Nephi chapter 23, he says, you Latter-day Gentiles, you read Isaiah because it was my covenant people among the house of Israel anciently, and it is the latter-day Gentile covenant people who repeat everything in Isaiah. And these verses right here, I'll share one other thing that happened in connection with this. It was about 2018, and I wrote it down in my journal of impressions. When I would go knock on doors to do sales for Babylon, beforehand, I would stay in my car and I would read a chapter in my scriptures. And I was reading the chapters in 2 Nephi from Isaiah regarding Lehi's descendants. And I had open vision, open up clearly. I'm simply reading these words, and I think I even had my finger on there, and with high definition clarity, middle of the day, sitting in my car, windows rolled down, I saw myself in a congregation, and I recognized these are Lehi's descendants. And in that vision that was opened up to me while reading 2 Nephi, Isaiah chapters, I saw that it was inside of a church building that looked like it was built in the 1970s and not really maintained very well ever since then. One big chapel inside of there, and I was up at the pulpit. As I looked at the people that were inside of there, they were filled with despair. They were sitting and they were looking at me Like, does the Lord have anything for us? And I felt the love of God fill my whole heart, fill my whole body, and pour out to them. And my voice became like a lion. And I said to them, if you will no longer droop in sin, if you will awake and arise from the dust and no longer droop in sin, I promise you in the name of the Messiah that the generation born to you will build the kingdom of God. And all of them had a spark that got lit inside of them. They still needed much nourishment from the good word of God, but it's what they were waiting for. They needed to know we're not cast off. And I recognize I was given that daytime waking vision in conjunction with understanding the primary message of the Book of Mormon, the call to repentance to the Latter-day Saint Gentiles is this. This is your situation today. If you don't recognize that Jesus Christ is calling out to those reading the Book of Mormon, he's not talking about all these Christian churches that don't believe the Book of Mormon, don't take it seriously, think it's a load of crap. He's talking to the Latter-day Saints.
Amen.
Amen.
If you learn nothing else from the Book of Mormon, that's what you got to learn, is that he's talking to us. Not just when he's singing praises, but when he's rebuking.
It's us. In other words, like when I read that, I'm one of those being called to repentance. It's me being called to repentance.
Yeah.
Okay, this was one that this one was vivid, and I wrote it down at 1:40 a.m. But as I read it, there's much more detail and clarity. This is another one to where it's high definition clarity. Now, okay, in my bed, dream. I was a part of a giant processions of ships happening in the sky. It was bright and beautiful outside. I was towards the front of a caravan of what looked to be 100,000 plus ships of flying wooden ships traveling over the earth. We were escaping great danger happening to the earth. My own commentary, it was incredibly vivid. The dream started where I'm kind of looking down at my feet and I could see these strong wood planks. And as I looked around even more, wow, look at this strong wood ship. The kind of wood ship that you would think maybe Nephi built with the Lord's help, the strength there, or maybe a strong Viking ship. And as I looked around even more, it was up in the sky. And it was beautiful blue skies, white, very detailed clouds that were up there. And there was ships as far as you can see. And I was towards the front of the procession and looking back, this procession had strength inside of it. You could feel moving forward. I'm going to read the next paragraph. For the most part, we were safe in our travels. I saw floating bombs sent up to attack the caravan. They would rise up from the ground, they would explode, and some traveling in the airships would crash and fall down to the earth. Quick commentary. They would come up from the ground, and it was sad seeing them crash, but it had no power to dampen the strength of the procession and the speed of the procession happening there in the sky. I was with a small group. Now, I have to say this. I had the impression that this procession was traveling over the United States from the west to the east. That's just the impression that I had. I was with a small group that landed when we saw our destination. It was a giant mountain area. Pause. This mountain was a massive rock crag. As you're standing at the base of the mountain, if you're looking almost up to the sky, that's how tall it was. No vegetation of any kind. It was a rock. And we traveled on foot from there to find where we would be settling. It was obvious very few humans had ever been to this location. As we traveled on the ascending mountain trail, I observed a very large and unfinished statue depicting Joseph and his brother Hiram. I knew that the statue would be completed soon. And I knew that the statue would be completed soon. This, you could kind of see a trail going up there. Now, when I prayed about this, I understand this is representing the great and marvelous work that's going to happen when the Lord does his strange work. There's going to be power in the people of God. When it's the king of Babylon, king of Assyria, when they have a level of strength to be able to destroy nations and wipe out whoever they want, imprison anybody else, send plagues and devastations, there is a far greater power among the people of God as they're gathered out. And even though there's going to be attacks that take out some, there is no dampening or slowing down the strength of the power of God in the work that he will be doing during this time. Now I got prayerful asking, Heavenly Father, this statue that I saw of Joseph and Hiram, was this idolatry on my part? Am I worshiping them? And I recognized this statue was just a landmark. Nobody had any feeling of, oh, wow, look at these men. It was a matter of, hey, we recognize this was a work started by these men and it's going to be completed. And even though there was this powerful procession, there was strength that we were allowed to be a part of, which didn't come from us. And it took us to the base of the mountain. It didn't climb the mountain for us. We realized, and even looking at that path that was inside of the dream, it looks like single file, brethren. It looks like, hey, we each got to climb it for ourselves, and there's no way around it. So there's going to be strength from the Lord that'll bring us to the bottom of the mountain with the invitation to ascend.
Wonderful. It's interesting. The last maybe month or so, I've had 3 dreams that all deal with it ends where I need to walk up some stairs. I need to, and that's how it ends, where I don't know where it leads. Ascension and the unknown of it. Interesting. So you ascended the mountain.
In the dream, I didn't. The invitation was there. In other words, I was part of a procession. I was towards the front of the procession to where the invitation is.
Of course you were.
And
let me up there. Let me up there.
and that's something that I'm always thinking about. Here's just something about me personally. When my oldest brother, James, was born, it was a particularly difficult pregnancy for my mother, who's very petite in nature. She was small and petite. And the doctor says, you better wait at least 2 or 3 years before having another child. And my parents were practicing a couple of forms of birth control. Ain't no stopping me. I don't know whatever happened, but she was with child again when there was multiple methods being implemented to prevent it happening. And I remember when I was there at the MTC, I don't remember this. I just had members of my district at the MTC saying, I remember seeing you. When you give hugs to your family and they go outside one door at the Provo MTC and the missionaries all go through the other, I was jumping over chairs to get through the door and enter the missionary portion of things. I don't remember that. I just had it reported back to me.
I don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone does.
I got to share. I have to share one more dream, and I have it in my journal of impression, but I'm not going to find it. I remember it vividly enough. I've shared it with Jesse before, but I'm going to share it with Jesse as well. No, this was not a dream. This was a vision that happened while I was laying in my bed at night. I was knocking on doors from Babylon over in North Salt Lake City, Bountiful area, doing sales, and I had seen President Uchtdorf's one of his houses in the Bountiful area, Southern Bountiful area. Beautiful large house. I mean, it wasn't a palatial mansion, but it was very much in a rich area of that part of Utah. And I wasn't thinking a shred of evil about him, because I realized I'm actually presenting my mind and my heart to my Lord prayerfully, saying, hey, Heavenly Father, I realize a lot of these men obtain a lot of financial success before they enter full-time service for the Lord and the church. But if you want me to be your servant, I'm willing to go through much more humble circumstances if you need it. And it was as if I heard, now what I'm about to describe, it takes about 60 seconds to describe, but it all happened in a flash, in an instant, where all of it was communicated in high definition detail. I heard a loving laugh and a voice that says, oh, don't worry, it will be much more humble. And what I saw, I was with a missionary companion. I was an adult, like about my age right now. And we were running out of a house to escape capture. And it was nighttime and it was full-blown pouring rain outside. And as we're running to escape capture, I grabbed my companion. We both jumped down into a ditch buried in the mud. And there was a little bit of branch tree cover in the area where we jumped. And I could see my companion's face kind of like, oh, crap. And I could see my face smiling from ear to ear, saying to myself, this is a mission. That all got shown to me in an instant. So I'm wondering, hopefully it'll be Steve. So Stephen or Jesse, if it's if we end up being missionary companions, just realize that's among the events.
Something's going to happen.
We won't be allowed to be missionary companions. There'd be nothing getting done. It'd be too much.
It's like, why do they take their guitars everywhere? I'll start us up with this, and anybody else who wishes. I feel like it's good to put the landing gear down right now. I'll bear my witness that the Lord lives. These are incredibly exciting times. Like, the storm clouds have gathered, but there's going to be beautiful, powerful strength manifest by the Lord. I bear my witness that anybody who wants to start inviting this, with all the humility that you have, approach your Heavenly Father and ask Him for dreams that come from Him, and to learn how to hear His voice in interpreting it. And I'll just bear my testimony that I know that that's available to us.
I guess firstly, if anything that I've said today has offended anyone, that's not my intention. I know some of the things that are shared they're hard to hear sometimes, but I think that if we're going to approach the Lord and ask Him for truth, that we don't get to choose what the truth is. And I would say that every time I've sat down with Jacob, I've tried to just tell the truth, the truth that I have, and to be unwavering from that. My testimony is the same. The Lord lives. The Lord loves us, and He's trying to call to us. And if we focus on Him, we'll be able to hear Him, and we'll be able to have interaction and communication and all these things that we desperately need to have. Yeah. And that it's worth it. It's worth the effort. It really is.
I think all three of us are very sensitive to the idea that we don't want to come off in any way as aggrandizing ourselves in any way, that this is some special thing. And I hope that everyone who listens to this does get the feeling that these things are available to you. And it's been such a blessing for me, particularly as I've seen some of the things come to pass in my dreams, and like that one where I had the scripture I mentioned, where I saw the scripture in the dream and I opened it up and I saw it there. I've had their affirmations to me that, like, I think we all want to know that the Lord is pleased with us. And, we worry. I know I worry, that I don't want to be I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be on the left hand of the Lord. I want to be one of His sons. I want to be His friend. And I don't, and to me, that is one of the ways that I go, okay, He's still happy with me. He's still willing to speak to me through these dreams. And I really liked this. We didn't do this, but there's that the scripture in Job that I mentioned. Maybe can I share this really quick here?
I've got it pulled up.
Yeah, I just so this is Job 33, and I grabbed the New International Version. It's a little bit more clear than the King James, but a bunch of them kind of read the same. So this is, I can't remember Job's friend's name, but Job's friend is talking to him, and he says, "But I tell you in this, you are not right, for God is greater than any mortal. Why do you complain to Him that He responds to no one's words? For God does speak, now one way, now another, though no one perceives it, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when the deep sleep falls on people as they slumber in their beds, He may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn them from wrongdoing and keep them from pride, to preserve them from the pit, their lives from perishing by the sword." Why do we have these dreams? Man, that is gold. This scripture is a gold nugget, you guys. Why does the Lord tell us these things about the war and stuff? Well, he wants to save us. He wants to give us peace. He wants to speak to us. And I hope that we can receive these words, even if they're hard. And I'll tell you what, this has nothing to do with anything that I've shared, but in the final days, if you see crowds of people going one way, go the opposite direction. That's a reoccurring theme in my dreams. If you find yourself in a crowd going one direction, you are going the wrong way, and you are headed for your destruction. Generally, that's the case. But anyways, thank you for listening, everyone.
Stephen Nix, Jesse Watson, I want to give great thanks again for both of you being a part of the Disciple of Christ podcast. And I'll just give one more mention for anybody who wants. If you're wondering if this is your first time hearing from Stephen or Jesse, I would recommend any of you to check out the full interviews regarding their spiritual journey that I've been able to record with each of them. So once again, brethren, thank you for being on the Disciple of Christ podcast.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Jesse. Jacob.